horrendous continuously. Still, I feel like people think that we're going to be in a prolonged bear market. I haven't talked to well, I've actually talked to James intermittently about this, but I try to avoid it because he generally says it's all over. So I guess like curious to hear you guys' take on 4-year cycle. Are we just doing like dead cat bounces down, dead cat bounces down? Obviously, it's very difficult to predict global macro as well as Bitcoin moves, but curious what you guys think. If you want to share, if you don't want to share, you can also say, I don't know, I can't share.
Yeah, I'm happy to give a crack at it. I mean, my answer won't be satisfying, but I think it's like a reasonable view, which is
predict
like
macro
in
as well as
the
Bitcoin
summer,
moves, but curious what you guys think. If you want to share, if you don't want to,
and I think like in general, since the election, crypto has done better than it otherwise probably would have. And then also like we had the DATs that pushed up ETH and Sol, and I think like we could forget about how much MicroStrategy has been pushing up Bitcoin for the past 2 years, but that's also been in the background. And so when things started to unwind around like 1010, like the flash crash, I think you saw like these premiums to MNAV get crushed, and then like an ephemeral like source of demand for these underlying assets get crushed. And given that like a lot of the revenue in the crypto space is predicated on like the pricing of like the largest 3 assets, that has like negative feedback loops. And so like getting here, I don't think any of this was like unforeseeable or like not the base case. I think it's just a reaction to price being pushed up too much. And so like getting the question, where do we go from here? I don't know. But I think like I have a good way to think about it, which is you have some like view on the probability of a bear market and you have some view on the probability of a bull market, and you just have to continuously be pricing both of those probabilities when you're looking at different assets in the crypto space. So I think that's harder to do with like Bitcoin, ETH, Sol, etc. But like something like Aave or like a DeFi protocol that like you're building out a cash flow model for, I think like in the bear market scenario, the next like 1 to 2 years of revenue are probably going to be lower than in the bull market scenario. And the bull market scenario is mostly a function of like what is the annual growth rate going to be for the next like several years. And so like the valuations in both scenarios are very different from each other, but like the expected value today is somewhere in between those 2 scenarios. And as it gets closer to like the bear market scenario, you can feel pretty good like stepping into certain names, knowing that like, yes, we could stay in that market environment, but that's what you're like, it's already being priced for. I don't think we're in a market environment that like things are priced for a prolonged bear market, but they definitely are much closer to pricing that than they were 3 months ago. Like I think like for a lot of DeFi blue chips, the correct price to me is still like probably a bit lower than here. And I'm putting aside like market goes back into bull market, but like just on an expected value basis. But we're much closer to fair pricing than I think we've been for all of this year, maybe other than like in April, and then even like for the past couple of years, it feels like things make a lot more sense than they used to. So kind of a long spiel, but that's kind of where I'm at on markets. No like strong view, just think the framework that I'm using is reasonable enough.
That makes sense. James, any hot takes, or do you generally
agree?
No,
not really. I mean, I generally agree. I mean, look, as you guys know, I candidly just don't own that much crypto anymore. I don't think it's like a super interesting spot in any direction, right? Like I've never taken like short trades in crypto because I think it's generally pretty silly. But there's not a whole lot of stuff that like really excites me right now. Like you don't look at Bitcoin at 90,000 and say, look, I need to rotate out of all my equities and buy it. I think it's kind of just like wait and see mode for something a little bit more interesting to buy. But I don't think it's all over. But I also just don't think the idea of like Bitcoin doubling next year is very realistic. Like it's totally possible to me that maybe we just keep chopping forever until the remaining market participants are just dead, and then maybe we can do something different.
Yeah, that makes sense. This kind of ties into a very intellectual debate that happened over the past few days, which is this idea of like valuing, let's say Bitcoin or Ethereum versus like I don't know, Solana, etc. How do you value Bitcoin and ETH? Because to me, functionally, they're very similar assets. Both don't make much revenue off the network.
I was actually thinking about this morning in the shower, where I do my best thinking. Are you continuing? Sorry, I thought you were done already.
No, I'm done. Please speak of your shower.
So me and Danny were talking about this. We were just
in the shower,
each other back and forth. Yes, in the shower. A few weeks ago,
together.
Yes, together. How my general view is all this stuff, by and large, trades much more like commodity super cycles, boom and busts, than it does any sort of beta hold asset. And I think that's kind of why everyone is always so pissed off in the space, is even when asset prices are at all-time highs, the actual basis of people is not good, because this is not an asset class that you can kind of just average into in DCA like someone would into SPY or something, and at the end of the day have a decent cost basis and be happy about where markets are. They're always going to be pissed off because retail participants are always buying at the absolute tops and selling the bottoms in the asset class. So when you think about valuation, I don't know, I think it's probably impossible for someone to say Bitcoin is actually, you can value it on anything. But if you think about it in terms of commodity super cycles and